welcome. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We're going to be talking about the SDLC, or the Software Development Life Cycle. I'm going to just hand it to Anthony and let him jump right in.
Yeah, in fact, I was just thinking, Sophie, you might be thinking, along with our audience, what? Why? We're not here to develop software. No, we're not. But if we are going to be involved in the security associated with the software application that's being developed, we should be very familiar and we should be working very closely with the software dev team on the software development lifecycle. Now, if you've never seen one of these, I brought one up artistically for you. Had a lot of fun in PowerPoint making this. But anyways, there it is. And notice it is one of those ever evolving, or revolving, I should say, life cycles, and that we are going to be figuring out requirements that the software needs. We're then going to be developing those requirements into the software. We'll then be implementing, operating, and sadly, the software may be retired and replaced at some point. Now, when you start looking at each of these phases in detail, you start to realize, the security teams should be involved in all of the phases. And the better they know the phases, the more adept they'll be at handling and even recognizing security incidents. It all starts out with the identification of requirements. What does the software need to do? And it's at this stage that, and I love this word, Sophie, artifacts will be created. What does this mean? It means any kind of a report or documentation about how the software is going to do its job.
Makes you feel like, what's the word for people that dig up dinosaurs? The word is escaping me right
now.
now.
Are they, I don't know either.
It is escaping me.
Yeah.
It's killing me.
Archaeologists?
Archaeologists, that's the word I'm looking for.
Gotcha.
Makes you feel like an archaeologist.
I know, exactly. And it also sounds so fancy, an artifact.
We're scientists.
But yeah, this is important stuff. And you can see how the security team would probably get involved with some of that artifact creation about what is relevant to security. Something else that's important to realize about this is when it comes to requirements, this is really important and is often mentioned on certification. We always have to remember requirements are going to be typically grouped into two groupings: functional versus non-functional. Now, what does that mean? Well, functional means it's a requirement of the system and it's some kind of function of the system. This is what the software dev team loves to work on. They're going to take inputs, they're going to define processing, and then they're going to have outputs that display as a result. There isn't a focus here on constraints or limitations. It's just like, okay, we need the software to take in a JPEG, manipulate the JPEG, spit it out. The software teams are adept. This is where they live, these functional requirements. Sophie and I, as security professionals, we are more interested in the non-functional requirements. These are defining limitations and characteristics of systems. See how this is going beyond just the raw tech of software dev and is getting more into like administrative constraints. An example might be the software dev person may say, well, we're going to take the credit card number and then we're going to do this to it and this to it. Sophie and I come along and go, wait a minute, there's a non-functional requirement of that credit card number can't ever be seen in full. And so now you can see, in fact, I even made a note here on this slide that the software teams often want to ignore these things. And you can see where the security team has to be really right there to say, whoa, time out. Can't ignore that. We are under governance, maybe by an external legal institution that says the full credit card number can never be stored. So you can really start to see, Sophie, I hope, why the SDLC is mentioned in light of this cybersecurity stuff, because we really should be not babysitting this process, but certainly there for the ride.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And what you're talking about here, this is like these standard elements of an SDLC, correct?
That's right.
Got to have these elements.
You got it right. Now, I'm so glad you brought that up, Sophie, because I mentioned figure out the requirements and then develop and then implement and retire. Well, we may have viewers out there, Sophie, that go, wait a minute, we have an SDLC and we don't have an implementation phase. So everyone might develop their own software development life cycle. Does that make sense?
Depends maybe on the company or...
Yeah, there's no de facto SDLC that you have to use.
Okay.
Yeah, so many companies will have their own. They might name the stages or the phases differently.
Okay, yeah.
They may call their implementation phase the operate phase.
So use your critical thinking skills.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, there are going to be security requirements for the application. And obviously, those would be Sophie and I's biggest concerns. But I hope I've made it clear to you that we're not just going to ignore all the other requirements. We're going to be with this SDLC as a security professional all the way. Notice that a lot of times the security requirements are going to need our expertise because there's going to be a high level of integration that needs to take place between systems. Think about things like authentication. These days, we want people to be able to authenticate oftentimes using username and password or Facebook or Apple or Google credentials. So there's going to be a lot of integration that needs to be done. And by the way, notice the security concerns might involve both the functional and the non-functional requirements. So it doesn't just lend itself to one area. Now, another phase that we typically have in an SDLC is development. And this is, of course, the meeting of both those functional and non-functional requirements. And boy, we, Sophie and I, would want to be heavily involved in this process. Why? Because this is where testing is done. Testing and more testing. And Sophie and I are going to have security requirements that we need to make sure are met. So we need to be involved in that testing to ensure that we truly have met the security requirements. And I want to mention it one more time here. Again, we could be breaking the law these days if we don't meet those security requirements. So there's a lot to this. In fact, Sophie, I have to bring it up. Let's bring it up nice and early. Southwest Airlines. They got in a lot of trouble recently for what? Antiquated software systems that failed them. So that was an interesting one, Sophie, in that it wasn't necessarily a security breach. It was just that their software was so outdated. And that's something that we should strive to make sure we don't let happen to an organization.
Right. It's not just about defending against outside attackers. It's also about making sure that our own infrastructure and stuff is...
That's right. That things truly meet requirements, and their antiquated systems did not. And I do feel bad for Southwest because they had made massive amounts of investment into their infrastructure, but it was just in the wrong part of the infrastructure. They've been very worried about, as they should be, attacks against their public-facing web presence and how well that works. Because we all know the drill. If you call Southwest Airlines and try and buy a ticket, like many vendors today, they go, hang up and use the website. That's the cheapest price. So they're really trying to keep that website protected. Well, during the implementation phase, we can hang out too, and we can help make sure that once it is rolled out, the security team needs to hang around and make sure that things really are working like they're supposed to be working. And notice this is when things can get a little dicey between the teams. So Sophie and I might want to stick around and help kind of mediate those problems. You might have one team blaming another team for a security risk in the solution, and we might be the ones that have to kind of mediate there. And then finally, we want to ensure, remember, that any integrations that we need to have work smoothly are indeed working smoothly. Now, we have the operation and maintenance phase. This is what most people think of as far as costing us money. And it is true, about 75% of the total cost of ownership comes in this phase. I don't need you to memorize that or anything. I just wanted you to be aware of really what goes into each of these different phases. And by the way, of the companies polled, 75% of the TCO was spent in this area. And guess what? About 30% of that chasing down bugs. So those bugs could lead to security breaches. So we really want to help with this phase as well. In fact, it's the main reason we have the software development lifecycle. This operation and maintenance phase can really be a cost-centric thing that we want to assist with. Notice I didn't bother to make a detailed slide for you on retirement on that kind of last phase, and that's because it's pretty straightforward. We would still be involved with it, of course, because there may be data or artifacts or things that have been associated with that software that need to be properly disposed of. And that might involve degaussing disks or, shredding disks even, all that kind of stuff. So that's an important phase for us as well. So Sophie, there it is, a sample software development lifecycle with some details about the different phases. And the big takeaway, I think, here is, boy, as security professionals, the more we get involved with that process, the better off we'll be.
Real quick, before we wrap, just out of curiosity, does the software development lifecycle use Scrum or Agile?
That's a great point. Every company is going to be different. But these days, you will almost always see it done in an agile type methodology, whether that's Scrum or one of the other implementations of Agile. Yeah, Agile is often seen here, Sophie. That's a great point.
Okay, so we went through all the different phases of the software development lifecycle, right up to retirement, where the software is spending its days playing shuffleboard and
that's right.
Enjoying the early bird special. Yeah, golfing. So thank you for joining us for this episode on the SDLC. We'll see you next time.